And first of all, we are going to talk about a very basic term, which is nature and nurture. So nature, it's basically we're talking about is the heredity. It's passing on different physical and mental traits from one generation to another generation. So basically, it's like the gene your mother passed down to you. And the nurture is the environmental factor around us, like the factor that is not our family directly passes to us. For example, our social group and family could all be the nurture for us. And this guy, Charles Darwin, I think maybe some of you guys heard him before. He's pretty famous, and he actually think that people are will be more affected by nature, and he pointed out how heredity and both heredity and environment impact individual, and he also created the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is basically just evolution happens by natural selection, and individual traits that benefit the species will be passed on. For example, humans right now are likely to have less hair than the humans like a couple century ago because we have more clothes right now and we don't need to worry about to keep us body warm. So the natural selection will make us has like less and less hair. We're going to talk about eugenic and epigenetic. So the eugenic is the belief in improving genetic quality of human population by selectively breeding for desirable traits. This is kind of like an idea that most of the scientists are not really agree with because it has the feeling of like we seem human as animals or something else. And epigenetic is how environment and person's behavior affect one's gene, and sustained environmental pressure can slowly change the gene. For example, if your grandmother, like the generation of your grandmother and the time period has like a hunger issue, or maybe like people are having like starving issue, hard to find food, then their offspring, for example, like her son and her like grandson, grandchildren will have like high percent of fat genes. So they're easily to store fat and easily to gain weight. So they won't like get starving and dying in the future. One of the study we're going to talk about is the twin study. It examined the similarity and differences in identical twins. Identical twins is like the twins who have identical genes, which is like 100% similarity genes. The identical twins who are separated at birth and raised in different environments. And the study claims that they might have different physical and mental characteristics. And another study is Colorado Adoption Project, a study the influence of both genetic and environment plays on one's cognitive ability or personality and mental process. This study claims that both genetic and environment are really important to shape our characteristic. We are going to talk about the brain. And before we are going to get deeper into it, we are going to study a term called plasticity. This refers to the brain's ability to change and adapt based on experience. We're going to talk about the really famous nervous system overview. Let's start from the CNS. CNS stands for Central Nervous System. It basically is just your brain and spinal cord. And the PNS is the peripheral nervous system. It is the different nervous system that branches off from the brain and the spine. And based on the nervous system, we have two different neurons that we need to study about. The first one is the efferent or the sensory neurons. It sends signal from sensory receptors to the CNS. And the afferent or the motor neurons, they send signal from the CNS to the PNS. So the easier way to think about it is just imagine there is a brain in the central, and the afferent neurons or the sensory neurons, they send information into the brain. And the afferent or the motor neurons, they send the information out of the brain. So A is in, E is out. Before we get deeper into the nervous system, we want to introduce our neurons. The nucleus is basically like the center of it, like the body of it. The dendrites is like the branches, and those are used for receive the signal. terminal bottoms over there is also a branch that you can like send signal to it, and axon is like when signal they need to be sent, they're going to pass through it, they're going to trans through it. This is the PNS and nervous system. So the both somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system are all kind of like the branch off from PNS. The somatic nervous system, it includes 5 senses and a skeletal muscle movement happen consciously. The automatic nervous system, it controls involuntary activity. You can remember it based on the roots of it. The auto means like you just keep doing it without you want them to do something. So for example, the automatic nervous system, it makes sure you keep breathing and your hearts keep beating without you ever think about it. The automatic nervous system is really important for you to keep you survive. And the two branch off from the automatic nervous system, the first one is the sympathetic division. It mobilizes your body and gets it ready for action. For example, when you're watching a horror movie, you'll feel your heart beat faster. When you got scared, it can also call the fight or flight reaction. And the parasympathetic division is to help you to relax the body. It's the opposite for sympathetic division. It helps you to slow your heart rate and help storing more energy in your body. There are 2 types of neural cells. The first one is the Galli cells. It provides the structure and they do waste transportation. They have insulation and communication. They form the basis of the nervous system. But they don't process the information. They actually do protect the neurons. And the neuron is the basic functional units of nervous system. They use electrical impulse and chemical signal to send information. And they are the communication cells. And there are 3 types of neurons in it that we need to know. Before that, we need to know something called reflex arc. That is a pathway that allows the body to respond to a stimulus without thinking. It involves sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. The sensory neuron get triggered and they will send a signal to the interneurons, which is located at the central nervous system. And later on, the central nervous system is going to send signal to the motor neurons, which is control the muscle. So just imagine you accidentally touch a really hot fire. And when you touch it, the sensory neuron on the skin, it gets triggered and it sends information to the interneurons looking at the CNS. And the CNS is going to tell the motor neurons, and the motor neuron will control your muscle and take your hand back immediately before you get further damage, further hurt. Action potential, it happens when neurons fire and send an impulse down the axon. It needs both positive charge and negative charge ions. And if you want to trigger the action potential, the neuron must depolarize. Then the neurons fire on action potential. If no depolarization, the neuron will return to the resting state. So basically, it's just like if no depolarization, there will be no fire and send impulse. And the outside stimulus need to be strong enough to meet the requirement, which we also call this a threshold for depolarization to happen. And after the action potential, the neuron will go through a thing called repolarization, and we are going to talk about it in the next slide. In the repolarization, they bring the neuron back to the resting potential. And during this, the channel will be open and let more positive ion back outside of the cell membrane for balance purpose. And the neuron cannot fire and you need to wait until the cell go back to the rest potential. And the axon terminal is a signal converted into small spaces and sent to another neuron. And the reuptake is the neurotransmitter taken back to the released neuron after transmit to save some energy. You can see at the left corner image, you can see the neurotransmitter, which is the little yellowish dots that is kind of like passing through it. And after the transmission is finished, the neurotransmitter will take it back to the releasing neuron so they can reuse the energy. And the neurotransmitter, they are the chemical messenger, can be either excitatory message or inhibitory message. So the excitatory message, they trigger more action potential and increase brain activity. Inhibitory message is the opposite of salutary message. They slow down your brain activity, preventing further action potential. And we're going to talk about more neurotransmitters. The first one is dopamine. This is very important for our reward system and influence our mood and make us want to seek out something new and give us pleasure. Serotonin, they help the sleep, regulate our mood. So lack of serotonin will lead to depression. And glutamate is important for learning and memory. The norepinephrine is the reflect level of alertness. And the GABA is the reduced action potential. And slow brain activities make neurons know when we can rest. Endorphins is a painkiller. It helps us to reduce the response to pain. And substance P is different from endorphins. They regulating the pain. They release pain and let us know if something wrong with our body. The acetylcholine is for stimulating muscle concentration. It plays an important role in attention and memories. They have two different types of the synapse. One is the chemical synapse, which is use neurotransmitters, and the chemical messages send message through the nervous system. This one takes longer than electrical synapse because you can see the image underneath the slide. The chemical synapse, it actually has a more or like a larger gaps than the electrical synapse. So the neurotransmitter will take a longer time to process from the sending side to the synapse gaps than to the dendrites of the receiving cell. The electrical synapse is the neurotransmitter that need to be sent immediately. There are channel proteins from the form gap junction and can directly transfer the electrical signal, which you can see like the yellowish things. They are the channel protein. They can help the neurotransmitter directly and immediately transfer between the two neurons. And the synaptic gap is a narrow space between the two neurons. It's between the presynaptic terminal and the postsynaptic terminal. The presynaptic terminal is axon terminal of the neuron, and they convert electrical signal to chemical signal and then send neurotransmitter into the gap. The postsynaptic terminal is the neurotransmitter are accepted in the dendrite. So presynaptic is the sending signal side, and the postsynaptic is the receiving side. And we can see the image here. The presynaptic, they have like the little space and they are releasing the neurotransmitter. Then let's jump into the major hormones. So the first one is adrenaline. When they release, they prepare the body for action by increase the heart rate or your blood pressure and something like that. That one is usually used for the fight and flight reaction. Next one, leptin. They regulating energy balance. They tell body when to stop eating. Ghrelin is they stimulate your appetite, making us hungry and want to eat. Also, we are able to store more energy. And melatonin, they help us prepare for sleep. In morning, melatonin decrease and prepare us to wake up. So it's a really important thing for our biological cycle. The oxytocin, they are important for social bonding. So they release when we are doing the physical touch and reduce the stress for us. So we are able to communicate and kind of like do some social bonding with others. And the psychoactive drugs are the substance alternate our brain function, temporary change our mood, consciousness, influence neurotransmitter action in our brain. So the first part is the agonist, and they are imitated or copy the effect of natural neurotransmitter. The antagonist is stop chemical from combining to the receptor side. So you can see like the little circle and the square thing, they actually block it. So you cannot combine the receptor side. And the reuptake inhibitor, they block the process of reuptake to increase the level of a specific neurotransmitter in the brain to fight depression. That one is important when you have some like mental illness. They're going to help you to fight it. And this is the psychoactive drug categories. The first one is the stimulant. For example, the caffeine, cocaine, something like that are a kind of stimulant. The purpose is to increase our brain activity. They increase the level of alertness, attention, and energy. So that's why like every time when we drink Coke or coffee, it will make us really excited. I think cocaine, they did a better job than caffeine to make us more focused and has higher energy. But the bad thing about cocaine and why cocaine is a drug is after you take that and after you feel like super focused, it will actually damage your brain and make your brain feel like your brain is so smooth and you cannot think unless you take more cocaine in the future. So never do it. The depression, alcohol is a kind of the depression. Its function is slow down the CNS, the central nervous system activity, result in decreased anxiety, and a moderate amount of alcohol will affect our cognitive function. So that's why when we drink too much alcohol, we might talk something super weird or do something super weird because it will affect our cognitive function. And because our CNS activity is being slowed down, so we cannot think as a normal human. The hallucinogens, the marijuana is a kind of it, and its function is change our mood and our thoughts, and it's actually impact our neuron system. So that one is directly affect our brain. And opioids, heroin is a kind of opioid, and it is a strong pain relief. And when you use it, it will increase our dopamine and can lead to addiction. The reason that why it will lead to the addiction is because it binds to our brain's opioid receptors and to make people get addicted, because people will feel happy when the dopamine release and they will think like, okay, I want to take this more and more and more. The first one is the tolerance. Tolerance is like the process of repeated use of a substance lead to reduction in its effect. In simple terms or in simple ways to say it, for example, if you cannot fall asleep and you take this medicine that help you fall asleep every single night, and the effect of the medication will be reduced because you take it every single night and your brain just get used to it. And for example, you take it every single night and like 2 months later you feel like the medication is not work for you anymore. That is because of the tolerance. And addiction is the compulsive drug seeking behavior. And when people they usually have the addiction, they really don't care about the harmful consequences. So people are going to do like stealing, they do like drug selling, they kill people, or like do something, or maybe like they are going to jail because of the addiction. They cannot control themselves. Usually, it's I think this is a part of the psychological symptom. And withdrawal is physical and psychological symptom. When a person who is dependent on the substance, they reduce or stop using it. For example, you have mental disorder, for example, bipolar 2, and your doctor they told you that you need to take the medication so you won't hurt yourself or hurt other people, but you immediately stop or like you reduce using it, and this will cause the damage to your brain, your body, or even like your mental issue. We are going to talk about the brainstem right now. So let's start with medulla. You can see at the bottom of the image the little red part. The medulla is they control the automatic function, for example, breathing and the heart rate. Let's go up a little bit. The cerebellum is for motor control, the coordinating of voluntary movement and balance, postures, and they also help for speech. Reticular activating system. They are responsible for regulating sleep and waking cycle. They're a network of neuron and help for attention. And we're done with the brainstem, and we're going to the limbic system right now. And the first one we're going to talk about is the brain reward system. And this is the brain they calculate and respond to the word and important for making decision and addictive behavior. The green part at the center, the thalamus, they are channeling incoming sensory information to appropriate area of the brain. So smell is the only sense that are not being processed right here. The hypothalamus is responsible for regulating vital life function, like emotional responses, hunger, something like that. This one is at a little bit under the central green part of it. The pituitary gland is the influencer glands in the body, regulating growth, metabolism, and reproduction. The hippocampus, they create new memories and store old memories. So when people say that if you want better study, like the study method, there are lots of people say that you should treat your hippocampus well. And actually, when you went back to sleep, your hippocampus are usually working to help you to store new memories. The next part is the amygdala, and it's important for processing the emotional aspect of memory and emotional responses, especially for our fear and pleasure responses. And we're going to the cortex part. The cortex, you can see it's the different area of the brain. First thing we're going to talk about is the corpus callosum. It's a band of nerves fiber that connect the left and right side of the brain and allow them to communicate. The occipital lobe is responsible for visual processing, and we're going to talk about it later when we're talking about the five senses. And the temporal lobe is interpreting the auditory information and sounds. Parietal lobes, it's process the sensory signal from different parts of the body, and it's important for the spatial orientation and navigation. So maybe they cannot find which way is which way. It might be there's something wrong with this part. So the frontal lobe is the biggest lobe. It's the blue part of the brain. And it's responsible for decision making, problem solving, planning, controlling speech. So the first one, the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for decision making and social behavior. And it locates in frontal lobe because it's located in the frontal lobe. So it makes sense that it has the similarity function with the frontal lobe itself. And the next one, motor cortex. It's responsible for planning and perform voluntary movement. It's located at the back of the frontal lobe. The somatosensory cortex, they process the sensory information from across the body, and it is located at the parietal lobe. The next part is not and with cortex, but with the areas. The first one is Broca's areas. It's responsible for speech production, how forms words and sentence. It's located at the left of the frontal lobe. Wernicke's areas, it's for language comprehension. It helps us to make us understand what others talking about when they trying to communicate with us. It's also looking at the frontal lobe. And aphasias is a damage at Broca's and Wernicke's areas, and it can lead to an inability to produce or understand speech. The corpus collection, the overactive corpus callosum, it's kind of like a uncontrollably fire message between the two hemispheres and cause the epileptic seizure. So basically, if the two hemisphere is like fire message uncontrollably, then it is called the overactive corpus callosum. And the scientists, they found a solution is they cut the corpus callosum between the two hemispheres and making the communication impossible. So your brain will get back to normal. And the next one is cortex specialization. It highlights the distinct function of several cortex regions. For example, the left hemisphere, it controls the speech and comprehension. The right side control the spatial reasoning and kind of like facial recognition. They have different functions. So when people say that like your left brain is good with something and your right brain is good with something else, this is because of the cortex specialization. And the next one, the contralateral hemispheric organization, it refers to the left hemisphere control the right body and the right hemisphere control the left body, like the brain and your body is crossing each other. Let's talk about the brain image and techniques. This technique is really, really important for us to help us to kind of like study our brain better and which part might get injured in our brain when we need to do it. Let's start with EEG. EEG is the electric to measure brain's electrical activity. It used to analysis timing for brain responses. MRI as a structure images to see the shape of the brain. fMRI is a measure brain activity by detect change in the blood flow, and the highlight area has more oxygen. This helps us to know which brains are involved in cognitive and sensory activity. And PET is just observation for metabolic activity. They use radioactive labels. So for the exam, I think they're more focused on the EEG and the fMRI right now. Before we go into the next page, there are a couple other ways to study our brain activity without using the technology. The first one is listening. It's kind of like using animals' damaged brain to absorb the damage effects on one's behavior. And cases study it involves observed cases with natural occurring brain damage due to accidents or disease or strokes, and scientists can see behavior and cognitive ability after the brain damage. So they can, based on the case study, they can know like which part of the brain is specifically functional. And consciousness is referred to our awareness of our mental process and the environment around us. Let's go back to the sensory. Sensation is the sensory organs collect information from body and environment and send the information to the brain to process. The transduction for sensory is the physical stimulus, for example, like light wave, convert into electrical signal that the brain can understand. And let's go to our first term that we really need to know is the absolute threshold. Absolute threshold is the minimal strength that stimulus has to have in order to be detected. An easier way to understand this one is you turn off your TV volume and you stand like 2 meters away from the TV and you slightly turn on the volume like little bit. So for example, for me, I can only hear the sounds after the volume turned over 25. So my absolute threshold for hearing and for the television is 25. Something like that. And the Weber's law is our ability to detect a change depends on the attentive of the original stimulus. The sensory adaptation is the brain's ability to decrease its sensitivity to constant stimuli. So, for example, you're hearing the voice every single day, and the brains will kind of like decrease the sensitivity, so it'll make sure that you can hear the signal in your future life, every single day life. We are going to talk about the 5 senses. The first one is the vision. This is really important part of our body, and the sensory receptors for this one is the cell transduce sensory information to the brain. And for vision, so basically it's the light they reflected into the eyes, and the eyes will go to the projecting clear image to the retina, and later on they will transfer the signal to the brain, and the brain will convert the signal being sent. We're going to talk about the rods and cones for this one. So rods and cones is the sensory receptor cells for vision, and it's for vision only. So rods and cones are not the sensory receptor for hearing, touching, something else. They have different sensory receptor. Yeah, please do not mix them. And rods are sensitive to light. It can help us see at nighttime. And the cones are response to color. They can help us to perceive a wide range of colors. How the rod and cone works is the message filtered by bipolar cells. There's a cell called bipolar cells, and then sent through to the ganglion cells, and which is the visual nerves, then to the brain. And we're going to talk about color blindness. So they have two kinds of the blindness. So basically, the color blindness means the inability to perceive some color or maybe all the color. Dichromatism is the difficult distinguish between two colors. For example, people are hard to determine like the difference between the red and green. And the monochromatism is the unable to perceive any color at all. So basically they can only see black, white, and gray. Or maybe like most of the color are gray. And there's some other blindness can happening. For example, the prosopagnosia. It's the face blindness. It's usually a neurological disorder that unable to recognize face. So people with that, they might be able to distinguish like which the specific traits on the face, but for the whole face, they have a difficulty to determine which one is which. And blind sight can respond to visual stimuli without conscious perception due to the brain issue. So for blind sight, it's like your eyes cannot see, but your brain can still get the signal. So that's why for the blind people, they can know which object is which by touching it because your brain is getting the signal. Okay, the next one is hearing. So how does it work? So basically it starts with the sound wave, and then the sound wave will go into the ear to the eardrum, and the eardrum will send a signal to the small bones in the middle ear, and later on they will go through a thing called hair cells, and that is the sensory receptor, and later on they are going to transfer to a neuron message. Two important things for the hearing sensation. The one thing is the pitch, and the second thing is the amplitude. So the pitch is how high or low to a sound depends on the frequency. So high frequencies will lead to high pitch, and low frequencies will lead to the low pitch. Amplitude is stand for how loud a sound is. So the greater amplitude leads to louder sounds, and lower amplitude leads to like smaller sounds. And there's some theory that we're going to talk about. The first one is the place theory. It's basically just the different pitch stimulate the different area of the cochlear membrane. So the membrane vibrates the most to allow us to distinguish the sound. The frequency theory. It basically just the rate of nerve impulses match the frequency of a tone allowed us to detect the pitch. There might be some issue with the hearing. So one is the conductive hearing loss. It just occurs when like a blockage or damage in the outer or the middle ear. And another one is sensory neural hearing loss. That is the damage to inner ear or the auditory nerves. The next one is smell, or you can call it the olfactory system. So the olfaction is the sense of smell, a detection of odor molecules by olfactory system. There's one thing called pheromones. It's the chemical signal that can affect the behavior or physiological of other members of the same species, and it needs to be same species. So basically what it means is I cannot smell the pheromones of my cat. I can only smell the pheromones of like maybe my other human friends, not from plants, not from elephants, not from cats, dogs. Olfactory epithelium is the tissue that contains sensory receptor and responsible for detecting odor molecule. And the olfactory cortex is the region of the brain. They transform smell into a neural message, so you can know like which smell or like what is the thing you're smelling because of the olfactory cortex. We are going to talk about the bestie for the smell sensation. So the taste sensation can also call as gustation. So it's a sense of taste, and taste receptor allows us to perceive different flavors. Gustation cortex is a region of brain responsible for processing taste information. And what can we taste? We all know that we can taste sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. Scientists think that we might have a sixth mouth. So umami is from cooked meat, like the taste from cooked meats or like high protein food. And the sixth taste that the scientist is thinking about to add on is the oligostus. It's the taste of the dietary fat. It's a very, very bitter taste. And we have different type of taster. there's a thing called taste bud, and taste bud will make us what kind of taster we are. So maybe like more taste bud you have, you'll become like a super taster. If you don't have that much of taste bud, you'll become a non-taster. I think most of the normal human will like between medium taster and super taster. So let's wrap up with the last one. It's our touch sensation, or maybe you can say touch and pain. So basically, it is the sensory receptor in the skin. They detect the stimuli and they convert into electrical signal, and then they are going to transfer into the spinal cord, and then they're going to transfer into the thalamus in the brain. The mechanoreceptor, this is the one for the physical pressure. And the thermoreceptor is they detect the change in temperature. There's also another one called nociceptor, I think. That is like any potential pain or harm coming to the body. They will detect that. And there's also a thing called gate control theory of gate. It's the pain signal travels through a gate and spinal cord, and the gates can be open or closed to regulate the pain. Also, another thing is called the phantom limb sensation. So the phantom limb sensation is the continuous feeling pain in limbs that's already been cut off. So it occurs because of the brain keep receiving the signal from the different part of your body. The here's. Let me add another terms before it. It's called circadian rhythms. So basically, it's just our biological clock. So it run a 24-hour cycle and let us know when to sleep and when to wake. After the circadian rhythms, we're finally going to our next step, which is why we're going to fall asleep and why we have dreams. So before we talk about the two theories, I want to introduce two types of sleeps. So one is non-rapid eye movement, which called NREM. You only need to know it's called NREM, and that's all. You don't need to remember other stuff. So the non-rapid eye movement, which is the NREM, they have like 3 different stages. The stage 1 is light sleep, easy to wake. They might have like kind of like vivid sensory experience, something like that, like you dream something. And stage 2 is brain activity slow down. And stage 3 is the slow the delta brain wave. And let's go to the rapid eye movement. And similar for the non-rapid eye movement, the only thing you need to remember is the REM. You only need to remember REM is stand for rapid eyes movement. REM is when you are into the REM stage, it'll increase your brain activity and have kind of like sleep paralysis, like maybe like you have some muscle movement. Your muscle movements will be suppressed, so you don't act out your brain. And let's go to the theory. So the first theory we are going to talk about for white sleep is the restorative theory. So the scientists said that we sleep because it's important for the physical body. The physical repair and recover of the body. And another theory is kind of like the add-on for the first one. It's called adaptive theory. The scientists said that explain why we sleep at night using this theory, and they said that the sleep enhanced the chance of survival. Also to store energy and reduce risk of danger during nighttime. So people might not go out at nighttime and do some stupid thing. So like sleep can help us to enhance the chance of survival because we're sleeping at night. We're not going out and like maybe do some crazy things. And why we're having dreams. So the first theory is the activation synthesis theory. Its dreams result from the brain's attempt to make sense of the random neural activity we experience during REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement. So that's why I said that you only need to remember REM stand with rapid eye movement. Yeah, that's the only part. Yeah, okay. And another theory is the memory consolidation theory. So it basically states that the dream is important for processing and consolidating memories. And our brain, our really, really smart brain, will decide which memories we want to keep. And they're going to throw away or like forgot the memory we don't need or it's not important for our lives. Maybe somebody ever watched the Inside Out movie before? And there's like a scene that those little blue guys throw away the memory balls. This is refers to the memory consolidation theory. The brain is throw away the memories we don't need anymore or like really, really old.